Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who raised us, who looked us in the eye and said they loved us, while quietly writing us out of their lives. This is a story about silence, betrayal, and a last-minute truth that changed everything. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever been told to smile while swallowing pain, then this story may feel familiar. Before we begin, we gently invite you to subscribe to Reddit Family Tales, where real, powerful stories like this one find their voice. Now, lean in. This is one you won't forget. I always believed that pain had a scent, not fire or blood or anything dramatic, just something subtle, like old lavender perfume clinging to your mother's sweater, years after she stopped hugging you. It started the day of my sister's birthday brunch, a soft, sunny morning in May, the kind that would have felt perfect if not for the pit in my stomach. I wore a cream blouse I'd ironed the night before, took the train from my apartment on the east side, and arrived right on time with a small wrapped gift tucked under my arm. It was a signed copy of a novel my sister once mentioned she loved, thoughtful, quiet, like me. They were all already seated at the garden table when I got there. Mom, Dad, Madison, her husband Ryan, a few cousins, and our parents' lawyer. That part struck me as odd. I didn't even know he and his wife were friends of the family, but I smiled and waved. No one stood up. "Sit down, Jules," Madison called, gesturing vaguely. "We're just about to toast." "Toast to what?" I placed the book gift beside her wine glass. "Happy birthday, Mads." She gave me a tight, polite smile, the kind you give to someone who's overstayed their welcome. I used to get real smiles from her once, before Dad started calling her his golden girl and left me the rusted scraps. They clinked glasses, everyone murmuring well wishes, and then Dad cleared his throat. "Before dessert," he said, holding up his glass, "we have one more celebration, a family one." Madison looked up sharply. She wasn't expecting this either. Dad continued. "Your mother and I have decided to update our estate planning, and we're pleased to announce that everything, the house, the land, the accounts, will now officially pass to Madison. It's time to prepare the next generation to carry the legacy." There was a pause, a long, strange pause. I felt my fingers go cold. He didn't say my name, not once. Not even to say I was getting something else, just erased. Madison blinked. Ryan looked smug. A few cousins clapped awkwardly. I stared at my father. "Everything?" He didn't meet my eyes. "You understand, Jules. You're self-sufficient. This is what makes sense?" Number I didn't understand. I was not okay. Not emotionally, not financially, not after years of scraping through jobs and medical bills on my own. And they knew that. They just didn't care. I looked at my mother. Her face was unreadable, frozen in that familiar mask of practiced detachment. My chair scraped against the concrete as I stood. The sound echoed far louder than I intended. "Well, that's good to know." No one stopped me as I walked away. And the worst part, I didn't cry. Not then. I just kept walking, each step steady, because I knew, right there, in that lavender-scented courtyard, I had finally disappeared from my family for good. I took the bus home that afternoon. I could have called a cab, but somehow I wanted the long, slow crawl of traffic, the stops, the motion, the strangers brushing past, to blur what had just happened. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to be anywhere familiar. My apartment was quiet when I got in. Too quiet. You never notice how empty your life has become until something like that happens. A public betrayal dressed up as a toast. I dropped my keys in the bowl near the door and stood there, staring at the living room I'd pieced together over the years. Second-hand furniture, stacks of books on the floor, a lamp I'd rewired myself. Every item told a story of surviving, of managing, alone. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the edge of the couch, shoes still on. I couldn't stop hearing my father's voice. "You're self-sufficient." That word clung to me like an insult wrapped in flattery. They'd always said I was independent, that I didn't need help the way Madison did. But what they really meant was, you're easy to ignore. I thought about calling someone, maybe Leah from work, maybe my friend Nicole, though we hadn't spoken much lately, but I knew what I'd say. They cut me out. They gave her everything. I smiled and left anyway. And I knew what they'd reply. I'm so sorry. That's awful. But that wouldn't fix the wound. That wouldn't unerase me. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up old family photos. Something about self-inflicted pain can feel like control. There we were, the four of us at the lake house, me in overalls, grinning with a fishing rod, Madison pouting because I caught the bigger trout, Mum laughing, Dad holding up the camera. That house, the one they just handed over, was where I learned how to ride a bike, where I scraped my knees on gravel and snuck extra marshmallows. And now it belonged to her. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry, not really. Just that hot, tight feeling behind the eyes, the kind that comes from being invisible in a place where you were supposed to matter most. The next morning, a letter arrived, not an email. A real hand-addressed envelope, thick cream paper, my name printed in my father's blocky handwriting. For a split second, I felt 10 years old again, a flicker of hope. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he wanted to explain. I opened it slowly, fingers trembling. It wasn't a letter. It was an invitation to a family estate meeting with their lawyer. No explanation, no apology, just, please attend. Wednesday at 11 a.m. Sharp, final review and signatures. Final review of what? I stared at the paper, then read it again. And a strange instinct kicked in, something deeper than anger. I wasn't going for closure. I was going to see what exactly they thought they were signing me out of. Wednesday came, rainy and grey, the kind of weather that clings to your coat and your mood. I stood outside the law office with my umbrella dripping onto my shoes, staring up at the brass plaque on the door. Whitaker and Jameson, estate planning, trusts and legacy law. Legacy. That word again. I stepped inside, the lobby warm and over-perfumed. A young receptionist with tight curls and careful eyes glanced up from her desk. Can I help you? I gave her my name. She hesitated, checked something on her screen, then nodded. They're already in the conference room, right this way. They, of course. I followed her down a long hallway, the sound of my heels clicking too loud in the quiet. She pushed open a door and stepped aside. The room was all polished wood and old money. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking perfectly at ease in a navy suit. Madison was beside him, flipping through a leather portfolio like this was her boardroom. Ryan sat smugly near the window, his arms folded like a man watching a deal fall perfectly into place. My mother was across from them, distant as always, a coffee cup untouched in front of her. The lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, silver hair, impeccably dressed, stood as I entered. Juliana, glad you could join us. Juliana. Only lawyers called me that. I nodded and sat at the far end of the table. No one offered small talk. Mr. Whitaker resumed his seat. As you know, today is to finalise the trust transfer and execute the updated estate documents. We've reviewed the assets, the liabilities, and the full inheritance structure. Madison's lips twitched into something smug. Mr. Whitaker continued. Before we proceed, there is a formal statement to be read into the record regarding beneficiary allocation. Dad gestured. Go ahead. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat and read from the paper in front of him. It is hereby stated that the primary beneficiary of the Callahan estate, including the family home, secondary property holdings, liquid assets, and all associated investment accounts, shall be Madison Clare Callahan. Not a flicker of hesitation, not even a breath. And secondary inheritance, he continued, shall be distributed as per Codicil B, with allocated portions as follows. He paused, he frowned. Ah, there seems to be a notation error. Dad's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Mr. Whitaker lifted the page and looked at it closely. Codicil B, the clause concerning secondary assets, has two names. Madison's is listed again, but so is Juliana. A long pause. What? Madison snapped. That's not what we discussed. Mr. Whitaker held up the paper. It's notarized, dated. This was the version returned to our office for filing 3 weeks ago. I blinked. My throat was suddenly dry. What? What does it say exactly? He adjusted his glasses. A joint split of secondary assets between both daughters. Stocks, the lake house. The grandfathered trust account from your mother's side, 50-50. The air in the room changed, sharp, electric. Ryan sat up straighter. Madison turned pale. Dad snatched the document and scanned it. His hand trembled slightly. There must be a mistake, he said. That wasn't the final draft. Mr. Whitaker shook his head. Sir, this is the executed version. If there was a change, it was never submitted. Silence. Then my mother spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was something deeper in it. I sent that version in. Everyone turned. Dad stared at her. What are you talking about? She met his gaze. I mailed it. I told you I would. You said you didn't care about the fine print, remember? My heart stopped. She looked at me. For the first time in years, her eyes softened. I thought it was time Juliana got what was hers. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The air felt like glass, delicate, dangerous. Madison's voice broke the silence. You mean I don't get it all? I stood, not needing to hear another word. I wasn't about to argue for a seat at a table they tried to hide from me, but I had been named, officially, legally, and they couldn't take that back. I looked at my mother one last time. Thank you, I said quietly. Then I walked out, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. For once, I wasn't the one being erased. I didn't go home right away. I walked for hours, through downtown, past coffee shops and dog walkers, and the kind of aimless weekday energy that somehow made me feel more invisible than ever. And yet, something had shifted. Not just on paper, inside me. For years I'd been shrinking, quieting myself to survive their noise, their neglect, their pride in pretending I didn't need anything. But when my mother said, I thought it was time Juliana got what was hers, it cracked something open. A small, quiet defiance. And pain too, a pain so old it almost felt like comfort. I eventually stopped by the bookstore on 5th, the same one where I used to sit in the back and read while Madison got her hair done or went to tennis lessons. That place had always been safe, no judgment, no one looking through me. I picked up a collection of essays, stories written by women about losing their mothers while they were still alive. Not physically, but emotionally. The words bled into me. They weren't about inheritance or money. They were about absence, about longing, about growing up with a hunger for kindness that never came. And I realized I had been grieving my family for years, long before this will, long before the brunch. Still, something about that meeting haunted me. Not the clause, not the shock, but the look in Madison's eyes when the lawyer said my name. It wasn't anger, it was fear. The next morning, I found out why. I got a message from an unknown number, no name, just a text. Check your email. Subject line, Lake House Trust documents. I almost deleted it. I don't open strange messages, but something about the wording, it felt deliberate. I checked. Sure enough, there it was. A PDF, 5 pages, legal transfer paperwork, dated 2 weeks before that estate meeting. It showed that Madison and Ryan had already started the process of selling the lake house, the same one I now owned half of. No notice, no conversation. They were trying to liquidate everything before I was even invited to that brunch. That's when it hit me. The meeting wasn't a mistake. It was cleanup. They weren't announcing anything. They were confirming a done deal, trying to finalize things quickly and quietly, confident that no one would notice I was missing from the paperwork. Only they hadn't expected the wrong version of the will to go through. They hadn't expected my mother to act, and they definitely hadn't expected me to show up. My hands were cold as I read through the documents again. Fraud, that's what this was. And Ryan had signed his name. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not rage, not yet, but a new kind of clarity. They had tried to erase me. Again. But now they had left evidence behind. I called the number that sent the message. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I didn't recognize the voice, but the message was short. Thought you deserved to know. Someone else out there thinks so too. Check the envelope taped to your back door. I hung up, heart pounding, and ran to the kitchen. My apartment opened onto a small courtyard. I rarely used that back door, and yet, taped there in a plain manila envelope was a stack of printed screenshots, emails, between Ryan and a real estate agent, between Madison and their accountant. They were moving fast, trying to roll everything into a private holding company under Madison's name. They were betting on the fact that I'd never see the documents, that no one would question it, that the self-sufficient daughter would never show up. But someone had questioned it, someone on the inside. I didn't know who. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, protected. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a new document on my laptop. Not a diary, not an email, a timeline. If they wanted to play power games, they'd forgotten one thing. I had nothing left to lose, and nothing scares people like that more. That week, I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I didn't even confront them. I printed every document, highlighted every clause, time-stamped every email, and arranged everything in a binder so clean it looked clinical. I wasn't going to throw punches. I was going to let the truth bleed through paper. And then I called a woman named Elise Chen. We'd gone to college together. She'd gone on to become a quiet legal powerhouse, now working estate fraud cases for high-profile families. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a decade, but when I told her what I had, she didn't hesitate. "Jules," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "this isn't just betrayal. This is textbook premeditated misrepresentation. They tried to illegally transfer joint assets before finalization." "I figured," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. "Good. Then you'll also figure this means you have leverage, a lot of it." Elise moved fast. She sent a formal letter of injunction within 48 hours, freezing the sale of the lake house and all related transactions. Madison and Ryan were served the next morning. I didn't get a call from them, of course not. But I got something else. Silence. The kind that tells you people are scrambling behind doors you're not supposed to hear through. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just felt tired. Because winning a battle like this doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like standing in the wreckage of your own past, knowing no one's coming to clean it up but you. A week later, I received a call from Mr. Whitaker, the estate lawyer. "Juliana," he said, his tone more cautious now, "I've reviewed the new evidence your attorney submitted. Needless to say, it complicates things." "No," I said, evenly. "It clarifies them." He cleared his throat. "Your parents would like to meet, privately, no lawyers." I paused. "Why?" He hesitated. "They'd like to avoid a public dispute. There's been some reflection." Reflection. The word hit me like a cold wind. I agreed to the meeting, but on my terms. Neutral ground. Elise present, even if silent. I'd learned enough by now to know this wasn't about reconciliation. This was strategy, damage control. But for once, I was the one setting the rules. We met in a private room at a downtown hotel, not a conference room this time, but one of those upscale lounges designed to look cozy, though everything inside it costs more than my rent. My mother was already there, her hands folded neatly on her lap. My father arrived a few minutes later, alone. No Madison, no Ryan. "Thank you for coming," he said stiffly, taking a seat. I didn't reply. I looked at Elise, who nodded slightly. "Go ahead." "We were caught off guard," my mother began, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "By your own actions?" I asked. She looked down. "By how far they went without telling us everything." "Madison and Ryan," I said flatly. They tried to sell something that didn't fully belong to them, and you were either in on it or asleep at the wheel. My father bristled, but said nothing. Elise slid the binder forward. You'll find all the relevant communications inside. We're prepared to take this to court if needed. We'd prefer to resolve it privately, he said quickly, quietly. I raised my eyes to meet his. You tried to erase me. That's not fair, he muttered. No, I said. What's not fair is watching your family pretend you don't exist until a lawyer forces them to remember your name. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, but it didn't weigh on me anymore. We're willing to reinstate you formally, my mother said. As an equal beneficiary, we'll sign whatever your counsel recommends. I nodded, not because I was grateful, but because I was done waiting to be invited in. It's not about the house, I said, or the money. It's about knowing I was never lesser, and you need to know that too. And then I stood. I'm not doing this for access, I added. I'm doing this for closure. I didn't go back to the lake house. I could have. Legally, I had every right. Half of it was mine now, more if I chose to pursue damages. Elise told me the courts would likely rule in my favour, especially given the paper trail. But I didn't want the house. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. And now it was. That week, I started packing up my apartment. Not because I was running, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for an apology, waiting for someone in that family to say, "We see you." I was done leaving pieces of myself in rooms that never made space for me. I moved into a small cottage upstate, nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a garden, and a crooked porch that creaked in the mornings. It wasn't an inheritance, it was mine, every tile, every chipped drawer, every breath of quiet that didn't need to be earned. For the first time in years, I slept deeply. I cooked for myself without rushing. I started journaling again, not for anyone else, but to mark time, to remind myself I existed. Then one day, about a month later, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Madison. I stared at it for a while before opening it. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Juliana. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Ryan's gone, took a job in Arizona, said the scandal made it impossible to keep clients here. Dad's health isn't great. He's not talking to anyone much these days. Mom just keeps walking around the house like a ghost. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. All those years I thought you had it easier because you didn't need anyone. But I was wrong. You needed the same things I did. We just got different kinds of empty. I hope you're doing okay. Madison. I folded the letter slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. Just a kind of settled silence, like watching the tide go out after a long, brutal storm. She wasn't asking for redemption, and I wasn't offering it. But for the first time in our lives, Madison had looked at me and not seen a shadow. That weekend, I hosted 2 neighbours for dinner, a retired teacher named Carol and a widowed sculptor named Maureen. We ate on the porch, under string lights I'd hung myself, sipping wine and laughing about nothing. And in that moment, I felt full. Not in the way money fills you, in the way dignity does. I still carried wounds. Of course I did. Some scars never vanish, but they stopped bleeding. They stopped defining me. And when Elise called a few days later to tell me the final paperwork had been signed and filed, all names restored, protections in place, I just smiled. I won't be contesting anything further, I told her. You're sure? Yes, I said. Let them keep the rest. Because what I had now couldn't be written into any will. The funny thing about survival is that no one notices when you do it well. They call it strength. They call it independence. They say, you've always been the strong one, as if strength were a prize you wanted instead of a burden you carried because no one else showed up. But in truth, I wasn't strong. I was just alone. And for years, I thought being alone meant I was the one who had failed. Now I know better. The weeks passed quietly in my new home. I planted lavender near the fence. I adopted a senior dog from the shelter, a slow, sweet-eyed mutt named Penny, who followed me from room to room like I was the most interesting thing she'd ever seen. I started volunteering once a week at a women's legal aid centre nearby, just answering phones, filing things, listening. It felt small, but not to the people who showed up with shaking hands and heavy hearts. They were like I had been, erased, gaslit, undervalued. And for the first time, I didn't just see them. I saw myself in them. That was the legacy I wanted. One morning, while drinking tea on my porch, I got a message from my mother. A voicemail, actually. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, almost brittle. "Hi, Juliana. No, I don't deserve a callback. I'm not asking for that. I just wanted to say thank you for how you handled things, for walking away with more grace than we ever gave you." She paused. "I always told myself you didn't need me, but maybe I needed to believe that, so I didn't have to look at the ways I failed." There was a long silence. "Anyway, I hope you're well." I deleted the message, not out of anger, but because I didn't need to carry it. I had already done the hard part. I had walked away without leaving pieces of myself behind. The story didn't end in a courtroom. It didn't end with a check or a confrontation or some grand apology. It ended here, in this house, in my life, where I no longer flinch at the quiet, where I look in the mirror and don't see the girl they tried to write out of existence. I see me, whole, present, chosen, not by them, but by myself. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt like the one left off the list, the one who didn't get the toast or the smile or the key to the family home, let me tell you something no one ever told me. You were never the lost one. They just weren't looking in the right direction. And sometimes, when the people who should have known your worth finally realize they didn't, it's already too late, but not for you. You still have time to build a life that doesn't ask permission to exist, a life with your name on the deed. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if this story touched you in any way, I gently invite you to subscribe to Reddit Family Tales, where stories like mine and maybe yours find a voice because you deserve to be heard.